Back when I was applying to law school, I had a low GPA, somewhere in the ballpark of a 3.3, not terrible, but nowhere near what you'd want for the top 14. And I remember thinking to myself, I know I'm smart, I know I can do the work, but will they even give me a chance? And that's when I learned about splitters, applicants with a high LSAT and a lower GPA. That was me, and I leaned into it. I knew I couldn't go back and fix undergrad, but the LSAT was still in my control. So I put in the work, and I brought my score up from a 152 to a 175. And that was the kind of score that opens doors my GPA couldn't. And if I had a 2.5 GPA, that's exactly what I'd do again. So let me walk you through, step by step, what I'd do today if I wanted to get into a T14 law school with a GPA that low. The first step is to admit you've got a problem. Your application has a red flag, and that's okay. You're not going to be able to sugarcoat a 2.5 GPA. It is going to raise eyebrows. Law schools are flooded with applicants who have perfect transcripts, and you're not going to be one of them. But that's okay. Just don't try to pretend otherwise. You're not going to aim to blend in here. You're going to aim instead to stand out in a different way. And that means shifting the spotlight off your GPA and onto something law schools care even more about, your LSAT score. The LSAT is your way to reframe the conversation, to say, yeah, I know my GPA is low, but I've grown, I've changed, and here is the proof. Then you want to build your admission strategy around the LSAT entirely. You're not going to focus on polishing your resume. You're not going to write 10 different versions of the personal statement. You're not going to email the admissions officers with quick questions just to get on their radar. None of that even matters until your LSAT score makes them pay attention. You're not going to be in the same category as someone who has a 3.9 GPA, so you don't get to play the same game. You're playing the LSAT game instead, and that means aiming for at least a 170, ideally a 175. Why? Because that's the kind of score that gets you noticed. That's what makes law schools say, maybe we can make an exception for this person. Now, there have been a lot of changes since back when I took the LSAT, and those changes actually help you today. You don't have to take the LSAT in person at a testing center. You could take it at home without the stress of the test center, no traveling, no surprises, and that's going to give you an edge. Also, logic games are off the test now. That section tripped up thousands of people. Now, you just got to do 2 logical reasoning sections in 1 reading comp. Easier to specialize, easier to master, less material. There are also more test dates today. You now get 8 chances per year to take the LSAT. Back when I took it, we only had 4 chances. And law schools also only care about your highest score on record. They do not average multiple scores, so there's no penalty for retaking. It's also easier than ever to get accommodations, so if you qualify for extra time or other support, take it seriously. LSAC has been sued several times over the years for being too restrictive. Now, they grant extra time to the vast majority of applicants who request it with the proper documentation. Bottom line here, you have more shots at the test format is friendlier, and law schools are more flexible. Now, let's talk about what your LSAT domination plan can look like over the next few months. It's not going to be some quick cram session. The idea here is to completely transform your approach to the LSAT. So if I were starting from scratch with the test, first thing I do is take a diagnostic to get a baseline. You've got to know exactly where you stand and what areas are dragging you down. Then you build a systematic study plan around your weak areas, blocking off ideally at least 2 to 4 hours a day, 5-6 days a week. You're not studying when you feel like it. Every day is LSAT day, and this is your job now. Then you take a practice test every single week under timed, realistic conditions. Not with your phone, not with distractions. You want to build up your LSAT stamina. Then you review obsessively. You don't just score a test and move on to the next one. For every wrong answer, ask yourself, why was I tempted by this trap? What would I need to see to eliminate this next time around? And was it an issue with the logic, issue of timing, or maybe reading carelessly? Then you drill your weak areas. If reading comp is your weakest section, don't avoid it. Instead, double down on it. Same with necessary assumption, flaw, or whatever areas are giving you trouble. And of course, you want to track everything. Keep a log. What kinds of questions are you missing? Which ones are you improving on, and how are your scores trending? Now, if you're aiming for the LSAT maybe this fall, say you're aiming for September, you can go for October as a backup and retake if you need to. Don't rely on one shot. No one test day will make or break you because you can always retake. Now, I know people always stress out about applying early, and they'll say to themselves, what if I can't send it all in by September 1st? Relax. It's better to apply in October or November with a higher score than to rush it and submit early with a weaker score. 1 or 2 more points on the LSAT is well worth applying a few weeks later, because law schools don't admit you based on when you applied, they admit based on the strength of your application. You're not trying to be early, you're trying to be the kind of student that they cannot deny. Now let's say you've locked into 175. Now of course, getting into a T14 with a low GPA is not going to be smooth. You probably will get rejected by some schools, you might get waitlisted, and you might second guess everything. But you only need one school to say yes. One offer can change your entire future. And if you go all in on the LSAT, that door just doesn't open, it opens with scholarship money attached. Now, there are 2 kinds of applicants with low GPAs, the ones who make excuses and the ones who make a plan. You already know which one gets in. If you're willing to take control of your LSAT prep, if you're willing to block out the noise, ignore the distractions, and focus on the one thing that actually moves the needle, you can do this.